What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast, hosted by Andrew Ellis and presented by Inside Arkansas. We are the number one source for all things Arkansas baseball, all things Diamond Hog, and I'm excited to be back with you guys on this Monday, December 16th. I just got done covering some transfer portal action, which really sucks. Again, I know when I say transfer portal, I'm talking football. I've said this now a couple times that I've recorded these Bombastics right after covering football stuff, which really just kind of depresses me a little bit. It's just not as fun of a topic. But I don't want to ruin everyone's holiday cheer. So I'm going to quickly reverse course and talk about Arkansas baseball, which, again, it's a much more fun topic, one that I really enjoy talking about. And we are one step closer to Arkansas baseball season. What are we at now? Like 60 days until the season opener, which is thrilling. We're also one step closer to Christmas. And so the vibes are increasing. And the anticipation is building for this Arkansas baseball team. And then once again, guys, I want to thank everyone who has been watching the show, commenting on the show, liking the show, sharing the show, whatever it is. I appreciate you being here. And, again, I feel like I'm talking to the real ball knowers, the real deep cut fans who are tapping in and during Christmas time to listen to some Arkansas baseball content. I really do appreciate it, and it's not lost on me how cool that is. And the ones I see you guys. I see some familiar names here in the comments every now and then, and I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to when we get back to doing some live chat episodes. Those will be coming as we get closer to the season, and that's going to be awesome. But again, I also want to thank you guys for commenting and throwing me some questions, throwing me some topics that you want to talk about. And one of the main ones that I've been getting here lately, to the point where I was just like, look, I wanted to do this a little bit later, a little bit closer to the season, but there's been so many people asking about it. So we have my guy L says, any freshman arms you expect to contribute? Ryan says, does any freshman make as big an impact as Stovall in 22 or Gackle in 24? What, if anything, can we expect from the freshmen on the roster? And Hog6489 says, great short episode like this. How about some of the other freshmen that might make an impact? Also, will we see Jay Woo? I'm assuming he's referencing Jay Woo Cho, which I do have to report. Jay Woo Cho, you will not be seeing him. He is no longer with the Arkansas baseball program, but we wish him well in his next journey. I've not seen if he's landed anywhere else, but I do know he is no longer with the Arkansas Razorbacks. So we salute you. We thank you for your service, Jay Woo. But no, you will not be seeing Jay Woo. But going back to Ryan's question, which really, I mean, the theme of today's show is going to be freshmen that can contribute in a big way. And I'm really going to focus on 5. There are 5 freshmen that I feel like are going to have like a real direct actual impact. I mean, they're going to get some playing time. And look, there's going to be more, especially on the pitching side. There will be some freshmen that they throw out here. But in terms of like real roles and guys that you really need to get acquainted with and know these names before baseball season, I want to just focus on those 5 for now. But touching on Ryan's question of will anyone have as big of a role as Peyton Stovall in 2022 or Gackle in 2024? So for Stovall, who, of course, for that Arkansas team that finished 3rd in the College World Series, Peyton Stovall was the everyday first baseman and, had his ups and downs throughout the year, but really lit it up there down the stretch and was a huge piece in the postseason for Arkansas. Tied Arkansas. I believe he broke the hits record for a single game in Omaha. Had an awesome little finish to his freshman season, which was good to see. I don't think you're going to have any true freshmen that are starting and playing every day in this lineup, but I do think there are 2 that have a real chance to do that. That being Brenton Clark, outfielder, and Gabe Frazier, infielder from California. I really like both of those pieces a lot. And Clark, frankly, we'll touch on their numbers a little bit here in a minute. But Clark really made a strong push to kind of force his way into that outfield conversation. If anyone was going to start as a freshman, I think it would be Clark in terms of like an everyday role. I think all these guys, both of those guys, and as well Zane Becker, who I'm going to touch on later again as a catcher, I think all 3 of those guys are going to get some starts and see some action on the field this year. But if any of those guys were going to earn an everyday role, I do think it's Clark. One, because he completely lit it up in the fall. But also just, I think there's more of a path where there's less certainty and stability in the Arkansas outfield. And you got some guys that have been banged up. And so wouldn't shock me at all if he ends up in the everyday lineup. Frazier, I really like. And again, I'm going to touch on these guys a little bit later, more in depth. But Frazier, I really like, but it's just like, what's he going to do? Unseat Vahiva Aloy? Tell Nolan Souza to pack his bags and get out of here, or tell Brent Iredale to take a seat on the pine. I don't think that's going to happen. So I think his path is a little bit more uphill. But before we do that, I do want to talk about the freshmen, 2 freshmen in particular. Carson Wiggins, I'm sure you have heard his name by now. I've spoken about him on a few podcasts as well. Awesome. I mean, he's the little brother of Jackson. You guys know Jackson, who threw 100 and, got drafted by the Cubs and is now making his way up through their system. So there's obviously some familiarity there. So there's always excitement. Arkansas sports, they just love bringing in brothers, don't they? whether it's football with the Allen brothers or the Morgan brothers or the Henry brothers. Baseball obviously has 2 Alloy brothers here on this team as well. John David White, Zach White, who were cross sport brothers. But Arkansas, it's been a theme that Arkansas just loves having brothers. And for whatever reason, I'm not going to complain about it because it just makes it easy to talk about. It gives us kind of a fun thing that we can point to. But I do think Carson Wiggins, if you remember his brother Jackson, tall, big, right-handed, through heat. Carson does he checks all of those boxes as well. But if you talk to pro scouts, not that I talk to that many pro scouts, but anyone that I have talked to in that realm or in that world, the overwhelming sense or the belief with him is that he's a little bit more polished than his brother Jackson at this stage in their careers. Obviously, Jackson's 23, 24 years old. He's getting up there. He's starting to put it together. He had some really nice moments last year for the Cubs in their high A team. But if you remember, Jackson as a freshman was electric. When he came out the gate, we were like, holy cow, is this the best pitcher we've ever seen? Came back down to earth a little bit, got roughed up here and there. Never really was super consistent as a sophomore. Frankly, I'll just go ahead and say it was a little bit of a disappointing sophomore season from him just based on the talent and kind of what we expected. I will go to my grave saying that Jackson Wiggins, if he had stayed healthy, because he tore his UCL in January before his junior year, and he still was a second-round draft pick, which again just speaks to the talent that kid had and just how highly those that are in power view him, how much money they threw his way. Says a lot about his talent that he didn't throw a pitch as a junior and still gets drafted in the second round, same as Peyton Paulette. But I do think if that hadn't happened, I think Jackson Wiggins was going to be Arkansas's Friday night starter. I think he was going to be obviously a big role for Arkansas. I think you were going to see a much, much improved version of him. Was he going to be what Hagen Smith was last year? Hell no. But I do think like what Hagen Smith was in 2023, which if you remember was a very solid, very consistent, guy you could count on. And he started some games, came out of the bullpen, but I think you would have been looking at an Arkansas rotation of Hunter Holland, Jackson Wiggins, and Hagen Smith. And obviously Hunter Holland dealt with some injuries as well. And with his knee and with his hip and all these different things. I feel like, that would have been one of the best rotations we had ever seen, probably the most talented rotation we had ever seen at the University of Arkansas. So I will go to my grave saying Jackson Wiggins. I'm not saying he was going to be perfect. Was he still going to have some 5-walk games? Absolutely. Was he going to leave a fastball belt high and have it belted out of the park here and there? Absolutely. But those are just things that come with pitching. I think the good would have outweighed the bad. I think you would have seen a much improved version of Jackson Wiggins in his junior year. And I feel like Carson is kind of God's way. Like I said, we didn't get to see junior year version of Caden Wallace, and I feel like Brent Iredale is God's way of kind of showing us what that would have looked like. I feel like we're about to kind of see that with Carson Wiggins, who, by the way, I should clarify, is draft eligible in 2026. So hypothetically, most likely, Arkansas is only going to have him for 2 years. But again, the stuff is something that's like definitely not in question. Fastball up to 101. He threw 101 off the mound in an actual live situation against Oklahoma State. Exhibition game, sure, but like against an actual hitter, he threw 101 miles an hour, which is just nothing to scoff at for a freaking 18-year-old. Slider will get up there in the 90-mile-an-hour range. And again, is he a finished product? Hell no. Not even close. He's going to be much better next year and in the future. But I think he's a little bit more ahead of schedule than his brother Jackson was, again, at this stage in their careers. So, again, I think he's still going to have his ups and downs. And, frankly, he had some ups and downs this fall. He only threw about 4 or 5 innings total, at least that I got to watch. And I'm sure he threw some more behind closed doors. But his first scrimmage actually got roughed up a little bit. Gave up some hits in his second scrimmage. Then he started to kind of turn it on a little bit. And by the end of it, he was as dominant as any pitcher on the roster in the fall. He came in for his 1 inning of work against Oklahoma State. Looked like that lights out 9th inning, 3-2. Let's go to this guy. Looked like that kind of closing type of weapon for Arkansas. And I think that's the role you're going to see him in, is a late inning, high leverage, go out there and be a flamethrower, which again, that's the role that Jackson Wiggins had in his freshman year early on. And he had some success. I think that's a role that Carson can really excel in as a freshman. Whereas Jackson was kind of rushed into that role a little bit as a freshman, and it didn't work out well for him, and he kind of fell off down the stretch. And then he was rushed into a starting role that I feel like he wasn't quite ready for. I feel like Carson, again, is a little bit more equipped to handle that role. And I think Arkansas can be very smart with how they use him. In terms of will he have as big of an impact as Gabe Yackel, I'm going to say no. And honestly, I hope that he doesn't pitch as much as Gabe Yackel pitched. Arkansas has done this a few times here lately where they have a really talented freshman that they end up closing games with, whether it's Tiger, Gage Wood, Gabe Gackle. All three of those guys were awesome. And Gackle, I will say, was the best version of that. He never had the fall off down the stretch situation that some of those other guys had. But I just don't think this Arkansas staff should be and will be in a position where they have to rely on a freshman that much. For those that are listening on podcast, I apologize. But if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see. I'm about to pull up some numbers here. So this is Gabe Gackle's game log here. Now, if you look at this, 2 2/3, 2 2/3, 2 2/3, 3 innings, 2 2 2/3, 2 innings, 3 innings. Pretty much every outing that Gabe Gackle had, Arkansas was asking him to go multiple innings, sometimes even as many as 3 innings. And these are also high leverage. So he's ended up throwing 50, 60 pitches, but it's like those are like big time outings, like tough to throw a freshman into that situation. Gabe Gackle's a stud. He rose to the occasion in a lot of those situations, and I'm sure Carson Wiggins would as well. But again, I just don't necessarily want to see that. To further this point, Gage Wood, look at his numbers here. As a freshman in the SEC, 3 innings, inning and 2/3, 2 1/3, 3 innings, 3.1. And then obviously you see gives up 5, starts to taper off a little bit down the stretch, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think again, it's just hard to throw someone in there. And look, the 2023 Arkansas team, they had no choice. They needed Gage Wood to do that. They didn't have many options. I mean, you had Dylan Carter go down. You had Jackson Wiggins go down. You had Cody Frank go down. A lot of guys that you were counting on for real innings ended up getting banged up that year. And so, look, they didn't really have many options. But I don't think this Arkansas pitching staff is going to be in that situation where they need to do that. And just for comparison, by the way, so Christian Fouch is the guy I want to mention real quick, because if the season started today and there was a situation that arose where it's the 9th inning and it's a 4-2 game, Arkansas has the lead, I think they would go to Christian Fouch to close that game. Will that be the case the entire year? I have no idea. We'll see how it develops. Maybe he excels in that role. Maybe he doesn't. We'll see. But he's closed games for Arkansas before. He throws 100 as well. He checks all the boxes. He also closed that game against Oklahoma State that I was referencing, where Wiggins threw the 8th inning. Fouch came out and threw the 9th inning. I think that's something that you should get used to seeing. Look at how Arkansas used Christian Fouch last year. And this is an entire season. 1 inning. You see some 2 innings mixed in there, but a lot of 1 1/3, 1 2/3, sometimes even just 2/3 of an inning, just asking him to get 1, 2 outs. This Florida game here, Florida, he faces one hitter, strikes him out, gets his first career, or gets one of his lone career saves. That is kind of the role I see Carson Wiggins in. That's going to happen to me a lot this year, where I say Jackson. And dude, when he's out on the mound, he freaking looks like Jackson. It's unreal. I mean, obviously they're brothers, but it's something that it's going to take me a little while to get used to. By the way, Carson Wiggins, number 44 is his number, and his brother was 22, Jackson Wiggins. It's not kind of like that. I don't know if that was on purpose, but he literally just twice the amount. I don't know if that was on purpose. It just may not be. But I just wanted to point that out. But again, I think if Arkansas could have it their way, and honestly, if I were the one making these calls, if Matt Hobbs calls me tonight and is like, hey, how should I deploy my bullpen? Which I'm sure he's totally going to do. That's a thing that happens. I think I would be looking at Carson Wiggins for that setup situation. Maybe it's 1 out in the 7th inning. You bring in Carson, he gets those 2 outs, maybe gives you 1 more inning, or he runs into some trouble in that 8th inning. Then you go to Christian Fouch. Again, I think limiting those guys to, and I'm not as little work as you can, but I think trying not to overload them with stress and wear them out down the stretch. By the way, I should mention, I'll pull up these Christian Fouch numbers again, finishes the year with an ERA under 1, which is unreal, unsustainable, frankly. He's going to have a higher ERA this next year, and he's also going to pitch more innings this next year. I just don't think if you're asking that guy to go 2-3 innings per outing, I just don't think you see that. I just don't think you're able to do that. And look, you're not going to be able to just have these situations be perfect for you every time. It's not like it's always going to be, hey, your starter gives you 6, you get 1 more inning there, 1 inning there, 1 inning there, and then we're all good. It's not always going to be that way. It's not always going to go according to script. But again, that's just kind of how I view this thing. I think Carson Wiggins is going to really excel as Arkansas's setup man. And I think he's going to close some games from time to time. And I think it's a role that he's built for. He's obviously got the stuff for it. He's imposing. And I think a guy like that, it's a lot harder to adjust and pick up to the velocity, the angle, and all that in 4 outs rather than in a starting role, which he might be in next year for Arkansas. And which when that time comes, awesome, go for it. But I think Arkansas has the luxury of not having to start Carson Wiggins as a true freshman. And now, speaking of starters as true freshmen, I got to talk about my guy Cole Gibler. Cole Gibler was unbelievable this fall. Left-handed pitcher. The fastball's up to 94. I think there's a little bit more juice in there. I think he's thrown harder than that before in his time. He was mostly 91, 93 throughout the fall. And by the way, was freaking like dominant. Let me just read you his numbers real quick. So this is not a massive sample size, but 8 2/3 innings, so roughly an entire game full. Cole Gibler this fall pitching against Arkansas hitters. Again, this is a true freshman. His first time facing collegiate hitting. 8 2/3, 3 hits, 2 runs, 5 walks, 16 strikeouts, almost 2 an inning. And again, your first time facing legitimate, competition. That's a big deal, man. I was really impressed with him. Now again, I said fastball up to 94, got plenty of stuff. I mean, he's 16 strikeouts, 8 2/3 innings. That's some real stuff. I view more as like a polished, well-rounded pitcher that I feel like if I had to guess, Gibler's going to end up being the midweek starter for Arkansas, at least to start the year. He might prove to be too valuable to leave in that role, because I know sometimes it's hard to pitch a guy 4 or 5 innings on a Tuesday, and he's available on the weekend, but like, are you really going to throw him 2-3 innings on the weekend if he just threw 4 or 5 on Tuesday? And so I just said I don't want them overusing these guys. I don't want them to get into that situation, but I think to start the year, I could see Cole Gibler being that midweek starter. And I think that's a good way to kind of groom him for what he's probably going to be doing next year, which is starting in the weekend rotation, potentially with Carson Wiggins, potentially with Gabe Gackle. You want to talk about talented rotations. That right there might end up being the most talented rotation we've ever seen at Arkansas. But again, Gibler, and now, by the way, I should also mention, Wiggins was number 79 on MLB Pipeline's draft prospect list for the 2024 draft. Again, not the number 79 player in his class, the number 79 projected like draft pick in the draft this past summer. So the fact that they got Carson Wiggins on campus honestly was a shock and a little bit of a surprise in the moment, but it's a big deal. Gibler, same kind of thing. He was right in that same range, a number 128 on MLB Pipeline's draft prospect list. Those are guys you typically just expect to sign. The Arkansas was able to get both of them. That's a big deal. That is a really big deal. And I think it also is a big reason why you didn't see Arkansas go crazy bringing in 6-7 pitchers out of the portal. They bring in Vital Shees, they bring in Zach Root, they bring in Aiden Jimenez, but that was it. And I think a big part of that was they had these 2 really talented freshmen who, again, probably turned down some money, but also they know we're going to be able to pitch for them. And if this past fall is any indication, both of those guys are absolutely going to be able to pitch. But Gibler, like I said, a little bit like I just said, Carson was a more polished version of Jackson. Gibler might not have the pure raw stuff that Jackson or that Carson Wiggins has, but I think again, I think he's a little bit more polished. Frankly, like I think he's a little bit more of a pitcher at this stage who could maybe go 2, 3, 4 innings for you and really help. Again, I hope he's not asked to do that on the weekends, especially with consistency. But I really like this guy's upside and this potential. I think you guys are going to really like watching him pitch. Which, by the way, I did want to bring up D1 Baseball had this tweet with a projectable 6'2", 200-pound frame and good stuff already. Cole Gibler has superstar potential for the Arkansas Razorbacks. So like that, sounds pretty good, doesn't it? And again, they got an up close personal look at him this past fall, and he was electric. Okay. Also, I wanted to play this quick video here just to get a little glimpse. I believe there's 2 pitches in this video. I believe the first one was the one that was 101 miles an hour. And then the next pitch followed up with an 85-mile-an-hour slider, which is gross. By the way, that was Carson Wiggins. I should have clarified. That was Carson Wiggins, right-handed, not left-handed, not Cole Gibler. That was Carson Wiggins, in case you want to get a glimpse of what you're looking at there. And if the hitter looked familiar, by the way, that was Jason Jones, who spent this past 2 seasons at Arkansas and then transferred to Oklahoma State. He was there in that exhibition series and played pretty well, by the way. Played pretty well, but was no match for Carson Wiggins there late in that ball game. Again, just a little bit of a glimpse into the kind of stuff that you could be looking at with that guy. And now moving on real quick, I want to talk about the freshman position players who I kind of hinted at earlier and gave a little bit of the rundown. My producer didn't have the notes in front of me to tell me how to structure this whole thing out. But again, Brenton Clark, it's hard to overstate how impressive he was. He's 6'1", maybe 180, 185. Not like a massive guy, but like got some pretty good size for a freshman. Outfielder, really good athlete. One of the fastest guys on the roster. And I think, honestly, one of their best outfield defenders right now. And he mostly played I think he played the corner outfield spots in the fall. I think he's a guy that is athletic enough to be a future center fielder for Arkansas. And again, came out of nowhere. I remember, as a matter of fact, I want to give a shout out to my boy Eli, who I was sitting there at the first scrimmage of the fall, and he asked me if there's a freshman that was going to start in the lineup, who would it be? And I said Brenton Clark, but I was not confident about it. I was like, I don't think any of these guys are going to start, frankly. I was kind of looking over there at Frazier because I like him. Brenton Clark literally homered in that moment. And I was like, well, all right, there you go. Maybe it'll be Brenton Clark. But I really, in the moment, like downplayed it and was like, dude, there's no way a freshman starts on this team. Like the way the roster's constructed, the way they attack the portal, it's just not going to happen. And look, Rocco Pepe, Logan Maxwell, Kendall Diggs, Charles Davalon, those four guys, I assume, are going to make up the three outfield spots. Now, again, I should say, if we were just going off of how those guys performed in the fall, you could make a real argument. And in fact, the stats that kind of show it, that Clark was better than all of them. Now, Pepe obviously only played like a handful of scrimmages. There were not a huge sample size there. He was very good. I don't want to downplay it. And by the way, all three of those guys I just mentioned, now Kendall Diggs also did not play in the fall. But those three guys that did play, and the two that played consistently, Maxwell and Davalon, were good. Like both those guys looked as advertised. They looked like what I thought they were going to be. But that tells you how good Brenton Clark was. He had a stretch there where he was just scorching hot. Just was getting on base. Would go like 3 for 4 in every scrimmage. And it was to the point, I mean, they were having him hit leadoff in these scrimmages. Really talented kid who I feel like is, again, a little bit ahead of schedule of kind of where I thought he would be and probably even where the coaching staff thought he would be. He was unbelievable. And by the way, it's not uncommon for freshman position players that are even like good, highly talented guys to come in and just suck in their first fall. And I mean like straight up suck. Pitchers, almost all of them do suck for the most part, if I'm being honest with you. And I say suck relatively. All these guys are very talented. All these guys are very good baseball players. I'm mostly joking. But like Nolan Souza, who I raved about in my last episode, a guy that I'm really high on, a guy that had a lot of success as a freshman and is going to be one of the better players in his position at the conference in the SEC. His first fall as a Razorback really struggled. Hell, even Peyton Stovall took him a while to get going after he first came back from injury as a freshman. A guy who was asked about in this, like, as could the freshman be that good? Like a lot of these guys, it takes them a while to settle in. So Brenton Clark doing what he did was just unbelievable. And Gabe Frazier, who I mentioned a little bit at the top, I think he's a shortstop of the future for Arkansas. He's the guy that, look, again, I don't necessarily expect him to play every day. And you just never know how these things work out. If you have a guy on your roster who's not playing every day, I don't know if you can assume he's going to be on your roster the next year. But this is a guy that if I were on this coaching staff, and frankly, if the coaching staff needs, give me a call, I'll serve in this role. I would be pulling Gabe Frazier aside like once a week, making sure he's good, making sure he's, you having fun, you doing okay, you need some more AB. I would be really planting that seed, making sure I can get him back on my roster next year, because I think he's got a chance to really start at shortstop next year. I really do. Defensively, DVH said about halfway through the fall, he said that defensively they had to get him to calm down a little bit because he just kind of like had too much energy, and when the balls hit to him, he's like getting a little excited. Defensively, I was very impressed with the kid. Again, I'm not Dave Van Horn. I'm not gonna sit here telling him that he's wrong, but I just meant like I was actually impressed with how ahead of schedule he was in that regard. Like he was he looked like a solid defender, played some shortstop, played some second base, played some third base. So again, I think throughout the season, you might see him at all three of those spots. And we'll see what the roster looks like, all that. I mean, look, we're talking about in the future here. But he's a guy that I think is going to get some starts, especially on midweeks. And I think he's a really good piece to have. Let me pull up the numbers real quick because I went through and counted them all up. Here are the numbers for Arkansas's three freshmen. You see Brenton Clark up there, 444, just absolutely crushed, hit 3 home runs, drew a ton of walks. And Frazier there, 259 batting average might not blow you away. He also had 4 walks, 3 hit by pitches, had some sacrifice opportunities as well. So a 412 OBP, 412 slugging, like those two numbers right there, you'll live with those 10 times out of 10, especially for a guy that's playing potentially middle infield for you. And that 1 home run, by the way, I believe came for Gabe Frazier, by the way. I believe it came off of Carson Wiggins in one of the first scrimmages of the fall. So Frazier, again, made a really solid impression, showed a really good account of himself this fall. I think he's clearly a legitimate, can play at this level, should be playing at this level, could play every day. He just happens to be on one of the teams in the entire country where his services might not be needed every day. And Zane Becker, by the way, the catcher, I don't want to leave him out. I do not want to leave him out at all. I was really impressed with Zane Becker defensively. You see the batting average there. He actually, you don't see this often, a 235 batting average and a 228 OBP. And as you see, he has the 0 walks, 0 hit by pitches, but he had a sacrifice. So that's how you get there. We gotta let some pitches go here and there, Zane. Let's let some go. But really impressive as a freshman, especially for a catcher. By the way, I said you expect catchers to not be able to really, or you expect freshmen to not really be able to hit in their first fall on campus. The fact that Zane Becker gave them even a little bit, hit a couple home runs, showed some moments at the plate, and actually got a lot better throughout the fall. Because his first 4 or 5 scrimmages, I don't know if he got a single hit. So he hit 235, which again, I'm not sitting here trying to throw a victory parade over a freshman hitting 235 in fall practice. But again, I feel like for a catcher, got some power potential. That slugging percentage is pretty nice there for his first fall. Got some power potential. Really solid defender. Really keeps everything in front of him. The next step for him will be controlling the run game a little bit, because there were some times where some guys ran on him. But I mean, I really like the starting point, and I spoke about this as well. Speaking of freshmen who typically are expected to suck, I was speaking about this with Ryder Helfrich last week, where freshman catchers, you just do not see guys come in out of high school as a true freshman and are just solid SEC catcher. Like, you just really don't see it. It's kind of like offensive line and defensive line with football. You just don't see those guys step into college and fill that role right away. So again, any type of production or success you can have with Becker as a freshman is a bonus. If the season ended today, I think he'd be their backup catcher, frankly. Elliot Peterson is another catcher Arkansas brought in who's from the JUCO ranks. I believe he led the country in hitting at the JUCO level as a catcher, which is unique. He's a switch hitter. I think he's going to play here and there for Arkansas and get some ABs. Might play more overall than Zane Becker, but if something happened to Ryder Helfrich and they needed a starting catcher, I really think Zane Becker would 100% be in that mix. Carson Wills is another freshman catcher that they have in there. I think he's going to need a little bit more seasoning, but I thought Zane Becker, man, I was impressed with him as a freshman, especially in his first fall. So I look forward to seeing all these guys in the spring and seeing if any of them kind of took a little bit of a jump. Because with Nolan Souza, that's kind of what happened. I mentioned how bad he was in his first fall. When they rejoined, when the semester ended and they came back for January, Nolan Souza, you could tell he was a little bit better, a little bit the game was starting to slow down for him a little bit. So I have no doubt that's probably going to happen with, Frazier, Clark, and Becker as well. So again, guys, those are kind of the 5 freshmen that I've really got my eye on. Those 2 pitchers for sure, no doubt, are going to have real meaningful roles for this Arkansas team, and I look forward to watching them. Y'all are going to love them. Wiggins, man, I think Wiggins is going to make his family proud, man. I'm excited to watch him. He's just fun to watch. I mean, anytime you can see a guy throw 100, you don't really need to explain anything. You don't have to explain why that guy's good. You just, that guy's throwing gas. That's fun to watch. So I think Carson Wiggins and Christian Fouch at the back end of that bullpen are going to be just must-watch television for this Arkansas team. And again, I'm really excited for this season. Excited to see what all 5 of those guys can do. And look, there's other freshmen. I'm sure someone's going to be in the comments and saying, "Oh man, my cousin's on the team and he had a good fall. What about him? What's going on?" But no, I think Arkansas's got some freshmen that are really going to help them. Those are kind of the 5 that I focused on. But look, I like this freshman class. I don't remember what it was ranked. It wasn't ranked as highly as Arkansas's class the previous year that was number 1. I don't even think it's as highly ranked as the one that finished, in the top 4, top 10 this past or a few weeks ago here. But I think it's a nice freshman class. They've got some really nice pieces, and I think those 2 pitchers in for sure are future top picks. And I think Britton Clark, man, I was blown away by him. I really cannot emphasize enough how impressed I was with him this fall and just how mature all these guys really seem to be, man. It just really speaks to the level of competition that this program has and the level of talent they're bringing in year over year, man. It just continues. They just continue to raise the bar even higher. So hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, drop it in the comments if you want to hear me talk about anything in particular. We'll have a few more episodes for sure this week, even though with all this transfer portal stuff going on. We'll even have some stuff over the holidays for Christmas. So be sure you subscribe to Inside Arkansas for all things on the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the Baumbastic Podcast feed, which you can find on Apple, Spotify, whatever. So stay tapped in. Keep that notification bell on so you get notified whenever we have stuff popping off, when we have to break a live commitment news or anything like that. I appreciate you guys tapping in, and we will see you later.